thing. So we will start with the first. Who is this? Does anybody know who that is? Janet?
Is it the Lucky Charms guy?
No. Jan?
Is it?
Ginger ale?
Well, you only get one guess. Jan?
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, who was the other one that had their hand up? Ann?
I had my hand up, but I answered already, so.
That wasn't the answer, though.
I said Verner's.
Verner's, yes. The Verner's gnome. Can you hear me okay, Betty? Mm-hmm. The Verner's gnome is on the left, and the barrel that was their other logo is on the right, and those were used to advertise the Verner's company. There are a lot of other ways they advertise, but I picked those because those were the most common and colorful. The official name of the gnome mascot is Woody, named after noble fellows who actually posed for the photographs of the gnome and the logs. James Verner, a Detroit pharmacist, was called to the Civil War in 1862, and before he left, he stored a secret mixture of 19 ingredients, including ginger and vanilla in an oak barrel. This is where Verner's was first made in 1866. That was the first Verner's store. When he returned 4 years later in 1866, he discovered the aging process had turned it into a delicious drink he called Verner's Ginger Ale. How many of you still like ginger ale? Yeah, me too. It's still aged in the oak barrels as it was made 145 years ago. The recipe has not changed at all. A Boston cooler or a Verner's float is made from the Verner's ginger ale and vanilla ice cream. And the only difference is if you can use a blender, the Boston cooler is really frothy where you need a straw with it, where the float you can use a spoon. The origin of the term Boston cooler lies in Detroit, Michigan, at least that's the legend, in the city in which Fred Sanders credited with inventing the ice cream soda. However, if you look in the history, there was no Boston Boulevard when it was named the Boston Cooler. That boulevard hadn't been named yet. This was their delivery trucks in front of their bottling plant on Woodward in 1920. Isn't it cool looking at those old trucks? All lined up. This was the building in the early 50s, so you can see how much things improved since the beginning. And these are some of the earlier bottles of Verner's ginger ale. Have any of you ever remember seeing those bottles? Janet, you do? Okay.
We had a bottling plant near my house where I grew up,
Where did you grow up?
in Sylvan,
Okay,
Pontiac.
good. This was the Verner's plant on Woodward and Warren, near Warren in 1985. And what's in the upper right-hand corner? The gnome. They were still using it as one of their symbols. This is what the perfect combination of Verner's ginger ale and vanilla ice cream should look like. That was named after Boston Boulevard. Now, you can't always guarantee it's going to look that way, but that's the way it should look. Verner's merged with Cadbury Schweppes. In 2011, Verner's Cadbury Schweppes became part of the Snapples Company. The Snapple Company became Dr. Pepper and Snapples, and now the company is called by its initials DPS. So they are the company that still makes the Verner's, the original recipe that James Verner developed. Okay, what's this?
Bumpy cake.
Yes, it is. Who made the bumpy cake? Sanders. Sanders Bumpy Cake turned 100 in April 2013. That's how many years they've been making it. Did you know it was that old? Mm-hmm.
No, I never heard of it until a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
A friend of mine always bought one where they would stock them at Rudy's recently.
Mhm.
So she's going to see if they had any today for some
Okay. Well, today they not only have the original Bumpy Cake, they have a raspberry Bumpy Cake and what's the other one, Lawrence? Vanilla?
Caramel, vanilla.
Caramel and vanilla Bumpy Cakes. But the chocolate Bumpy Cake is still the best. Anyway, Frederick Sanders Schmidt opened his store in Detroit in 1875 because he moved here from Chicago. It was on Woodward Avenue in Gratiot and opened on June 17th of that year. And in the next photo, you'll see him in front of his store in 1890. In the summer of 1876, he ran out of fresh cream for his Sanders cream soda he used to make. And so instead, he used a scoop of ice cream, and his customers loved it so much that it was offered in all of his stores throughout the United States. This is the store that was on Woodward Avenue in Gratiot and opened in June 17, 1875. And this is 1890, and you can tell who he is because he's the only man in the photo. But that's a photo of him in his store. And this was what you saw now what the Boston Cooler looked like. This is what the ice cream soda looked like. This was the nation's first ice cream soda. Also very popular is Sanders Hot Fudge. Do you know that you can get that anywhere now? But it's still the original recipe. Sanders ice cream, using the Sanders recipe, is made by the Guernsey Farms Dairy. Excuse me. I wanted to use some Sanders ice cream today until they told me, you know how when you go to get cones at places, they have the big containers that are about 3 pounds? Well, they won't sell it in less than 3 pounds for $45. So I'm sorry, there's no Sanders ice cream today. But the company that makes their ice cream is the Guernsey Dairy Farm. So somebody else we're going to get into that makes the candy, but Guernsey makes the ice cream.
Does somebody still make the candy?
Mm-hmm. Old Sanders factory and warehouse was in Highland Park, and it was destroyed by fire July 16th, 1974. After having several owners and business declining in the 70s, the rights and products were sold to the Morley Candy Company. You all know who that is, right? Okay. The Morley Company honors the recipes perfected by the Sanders family, so even though they're making it, it's the exact same recipe. Nothing has changed at all. This is the Morley Candy Factory located on Hall Road in Clinton Township. In case you're interested, several people here at the library and in my last presentation, they have actually been there, and you can do the self-guided tour or the stop and shop tours. Some of them decided they wanted to spend their money, so they did the stop and shop tours. And it's Monday through Friday, excluding holidays. This is at Great Lakes, and it's still there. Opened in March 29th, 2012, and it's in Great Lakes Crossing. You know how you can go into Bed Bath & Beyond right through their store without going into the mall? Well, if you go out the other end, that's where this is located. And they don't sell everything. They sell some of the ice cream flavors. They sell mostly the chocolate Bumpy Cake, and I think they do the sodas still. Okay, somebody who hasn't answered. Betty? Farmer Jack's. How many of you shopped at Farmer Jack's like I did? A lot of us. This was the Farmer Jack store. You're all familiar with the White Lake and Dixie Shopping Center. And this was the Farmer Jack store. That was one of the big stores in Clarkston. In 1967, the Borman brothers convert their stores to Farmer Jack name. 1988, they were sold to A&P. 1996, the 100th Farmer Jack was opened. In 2005, many of the stores were closed. And again in 2005, A&P put the chain up for sale, and the last Farmer Jack closed on July 7th, 2007. Kroger bought some of the Farmer Jacks and converted them to Kroger stores. The others they demolished and just used the land and built their own stores. This is when it was going out of business, and they had a lot of sales because they weren't returning anything in the store. They wanted to sell everything. They were even selling the shelves and the freezer sections and everything. And this is one of the places where it was demolished to make way for a new Kroger store. And here we are, back to the first photo. July 16th, 2013. Neiman's Family Market opens in the old Farmer Jack store, right there on White Lake and Dixie and the Commons Shopping Center. How many of you shop there? Oh, I see a couple of people here. Yes, their sandwiches are good. They're very, very good. And I'm going to tell you something that's not on here, but last year, November 1st, I fell and I broke my wrist. And I had my arm in a cast from here all the way up here, so I wouldn't move my thumb or my elbow. And I didn't know how I was going to do grocery shopping, and I called Neiman's, and they have a woman there. Her name is Debbie Hernandez, and she said, all you do is come in, bring me your grocery list. I push the basket, we'll go through the store, see which brand you want, pull it off the shelf, put it in the cart, and take it up to the conveyor belt to be paid for, and then the boys that pack will take it out to the car. I did that every week till my cast was off. Yes, it's a service they do for the community. Okay, what department store is this?
Hudson.
Nope.
Glower?
Nope. What does that look like in the middle? Okay. Think downtown. Think what department store had a bridge connecting two buildings? Oh, I finally got you. Ah. Crowley's.
Oh, Crowley.
Crowley's. One of Detroit's big three. Do you know what the other two were?
Jacobson.
No. I mean, it was there, but it wasn't one of the three. Hudson's, Crowley's, and Kearns. Those were the three big ones. This story begins in 1901 when Willard Partridge and Henry Blackwell teamed up to open P&B. In 1906, the store covered part of the block from Gratiot to Monroe and extended from Farmer Street for half a block. The panic of 1907 was more than they could handle, so they went out of business. This was the building with the P&B still on top in 1915. Crowley and Milner took over P&B July 13, 1908, and they were the very first retailer to have a return merchandise desk set up for people who bought things they wanted to bring back. Noting most shoppers were women, they were smart, not like some builders today. More women's restrooms were added and also a sick room. And then they opened a restaurant. Now this is the same building, the same P&B building, but they've changed it now to Crowley and Milner. It's just a different angle of what you saw first. This was Crowley's towel department in 1941. And the next picture I'm going to show you is something probably nobody's talked about for a long time after I tell you about this. In 1917, the building was expanded to take up the entire block. In 1920, they bought the building on Library Street, tore it down, built an 11th-story tower that became their store for home products. So that second building was like for furniture, for carpeting, for curtains, anything to do with the home. And at first, the two buildings were connected by a tunnel until 1923, when they built the bridge. That was my first photo, to show you the bridge. And this is showing the bridge connecting the two buildings. Okay, when's the last time you heard that word? Long, long time ago?
That's been a while.
Yes. We don't use corsets anymore. definitely not. And like Hudson's and like Kearns and the other big stores downtown, Crowley's also had the October thrift sales. So you'd get really, really good bargains when you went during those times. Did any of you shop downtown during their thrift days at all? Okay. When my husband and I got married in 1966, he worked for the city, and we still had to live in the city. That was one of the requirements. So we lived in the Lafayette Elmwood Park, east of downtown, so we shopped downtown a lot. We'll miss all those stores, but we moved here too. Crowley's introduced a number of firsts to Detroit. The first elevator in 1909. Souvenir photos with Santa, and then in 1951, lunch with Santa. Yes, Hudson's did this too, but Crowley's was the first to do it. Sixth floor nursery and play center staffed by trained teachers. In looking up stuff about these stores, I learned things I didn't know. And a lot of this information comes from the Detroit Historical Society. Crowley's had a beauty salon. This is from 1941. Do you remember those big dryers you had to wear on your head? Yes. In 1946, Crowley's was 800,000 square feet and employed 1,450 people. Its 50th anniversary was 1958. And in the 50s, with suburban shopping malls and the expressways, people began to stop shopping downtown unless you lived close like we did. In May of 1973 was when Crowley's downtown store was beginning to be considered obsolete, and store employees were notified January 4th, 1977, that the store would close July 2nd. I think that was kind of nice of the company. They waited till after the holidays to tell them that. Now, when I was growing up, I lived near Belle Isle, and my parents would take my brother and I downtown every year for our new winter coat. So even then, we went downtown. It took 3 years for the Crowley's complex to be demolished. They used a 6,000-pound wrecking ball. And on September 21, 1980, the tower at Monroe and Randolph caught fire because of the wrecker's torch, and it set the remaining building on fire, so that finished demolishing it. And there you see some of the demolishment. But it took 3 years using a wrecking ball. Crowley's continued to do business in the suburbs, but eventually found that their business was floundering. So on February 8th, 1999, Crowley's filed for bankruptcy, liquidated its remaining store, and now it's just a Detroit memory. No Crowley's anymore. Okay, what department store is this? In my first presentation, nobody got this one at all. Nobody. Want to take any?
You gave us a hint that is this one Kearns?
No, I can give you a hint that it's an apartment building now. It's still standing. I can give you a hint that Lawrence's mother worked there.
Grandmother.
Pardon?
My grandmother. Mom.
Your grandmother, his grandmother. No?
It's not the Park Shelton.
Himmelhoek.
Him.
My family didn't shop at Himmelhoek. We couldn't afford real expensive stuff. Himmelhoek was originally designed in 1901 for office and retail use. It was founded in 1907 by Wolf Himmelhoek, and I can't do the German pronunciation of the first name. Sorry about that. And Himmelhoek Brothers and Companies was a women's specialty store located in downtown with entrances on Woodward Avenue and Washington Boulevard. And they eventually added menswear and had suburban stores, but the majority of what they sold was high-end women's fashion clothing. That's Himmelhoek's downtown store. Very fancy going in the store. It was family operated, known for its moderate to better merchandise, but again, due to declining fashion styles, the business declined. And in 1978, the store filed for bankruptcy and closed all of its stores that December. And the downtown store was converted to an apartment complex. In 1980, that's when the downtown store was renovated to create spacious apartment homes. This was the same picture I showed you in the guessing photo. You can just see it a little better. Now it's called Himmelhoek Apartments. Oops, ooh, what did I do? Okay, here we go. I get scared when I do that. This is the entranceway when it was the department store. This is a hallway now in the apartment building. And they have spacious studios, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, and they're considered the best of both worlds. They're in high-rise apartments with historic charm and modern conveniences. But look at the size of that apartment. That's a 1 bedroom. That's not a small apartment. That's a pretty good size one. My husband and I, the first year we were married, we lived in Lafayette Towers in Detroit. And this is bigger than the apartment we had there. Okay, we are going to take a short break because we are going to have a Werner's Boston Cooler. We hope, if not, it will be the ice cream soda, depending on where our ice cream is like, and Sanders Bumpy Cake. Sanders, excuse me. My parents used to say Sanders. Sanders Bumpy Cake. Okay, everybody should recognize this department store. Yes, Hudson's. Hudson's.
My grandma worked there.
Your grandmother worked there?
She worked there.
What department did she work in, do you know?
I'm not sure, but I know that she did work there for a long time. It was
Okay.
her job.
Well, there's a lot of history about Hudson that even though I shopped there a lot in the downtown store, I never knew. Joseph Hudson and his father ran a men's clothing store in Ionia, Michigan. During the Panic of 1873, when the sawmills closed, customers couldn't pay their bills and his father died. 3 years later, the son went bankrupt and he paid his creditors 60 cents on the dollar. 3 years later, he started over in Detroit in 1881, and the first Hudson's was in the old Detroit Opera House. In 1888, this is very unusual. In 1888, he looked up all of the creditors he had shorted in bankruptcy 12 years earlier and paid them in full with interest. You never hear that happening today, ever.
It goes the other way, isn't it?
It goes the other way. Yes, it does. Hearing me okay? Okay. This is the first Hudson's, and that's the old Opera House. In 1911, he opened up the first building of the department store with Hudson's name on the top. And the store at Woodward and Gratiot was massive. At that time, it was the tallest department store in the world. The store was 2,124,316 square feet. It was spread over 32 floors, 25 floors, 2 half floors, a mezzanine, and 4 basements. The building had 51 passenger elevators, 17 freight elevators, 8 employee elevators, and 48 escalators, and the largest freight elevator could accommodate a semi-trailer. I didn't know there were that many elevators, and I didn't know that they had one that large. It had 39 men's restrooms, 50 women's restrooms, and 10 private restrooms for executives. The largest restroom was a women's lounge on the 4th floor that had 85 stalls. I don't think in all the time I was in that building I ever went to that one. But as you all know, when you go places today, you're lucky sometimes to have 4 women's stalls. But they were way ahead of their time. They really were.
Well, now, every one of those elevators would have an operator too, wouldn't it?
Yes, at that time, and then later they were automated.
Yeah.
This was a window display at Hudson's in 1928, showing children's clothing.
Pretty.
And this was their anniversary, 75th anniversary, 1968. Can you see the horse-drawn They actually used a horse-drawn buggy for the anniversary because when Hudson's first opened, you didn't see cars and buses. That's all you saw were the buggies. This was the jewelry department, the high-end jewelry department. And how many of you knew Hudson's had a children's barber shop? I didn't know that either. And look how huge it was. Hudson's had 705 fitting rooms, which was a world record. The dining rooms and cafeteria served an average of 10,000 meals a day, not counting the 6,000 employee meals that were served in the employee cafeteria on the 14th floor. The 13th floor dining room was renowned for its Maurice salad and Canadian cheese soup. Any of you had that? I don't know what their recipe is, but it's delicious. This is the Hudson's 13th floor dining room. This was the mezzanine tea room. In 1954, Hudson's had sales of more than 163 million, which would be 1.28 billion today. In 1961, Joseph Hudson, the founder's great-nephew, became the business president, emphasizing fashion, special events, and expanding by opening the Hudson stores in the suburbs. In 1969, Hudson's merged with Dayton Company of Minneapolis, creating the Dayton Hudson Corporation. And as the business in the downtown store declined, it was closed on January 17, 1983, after being open for 90 years of business. How many of you remember when Hudson sponsored the Thanksgiving Day Parade? We had a friend who worked for one of the photo companies across the street, so we never had to stand outside in the cold with our coats on. We were always invited to go, and it was up on the 4th floor, and you could get a really nice view of the parade. And that's the tree they always had at Christmas time. I'm nostalgic. I miss those kind of things.
Yeah, it was very centered on the city.
Yep, it was. The Hudson building continued to be used by the company's corporate office, and about 1,200 people worked there until 1990, when the building was sold to Southwestern Associates of Windsor, Ontario. There had been a lot of talk about redeveloping the building, even turning it into a parking garage, which I think I would have cringed if they had done that. But it never happened, so on October 24th, 1998, the building was imploded at 5:45 p.m. That was a sad day for my husband and I. It really was. In 1969, the Hudson Company merged with the Dayton Corporation, like I said, Dayton Hudson. Then Dayton Hudson, which is now called the Target Corporation, acquired Chicago-based Marshall Fields, and both remained separate stores till 2001, when they became all Marshall Field stores. 2000, Dayton Hudson was also purchased by Target and then sold to the Dayton Hudson stores to Marshall Fields. And in September 21, 2005, not that long ago, they all became Macy's. And if you go to the dining room in Macy's, you can still get that Maurice salad and the Canadian cheese soup. They still serve it. Okay, how about this department store? Can you guess which department store this is? I'll even take guesses from... No. Pardon?
Not one you mentioned already?
Maybe, in talking I may have. Anybody can take a guess that they want.
Is it Kearns?
Yes, it's Kearns.
I am not from here.
And you knew it. Kearns Building. You know what's in front of the building that's really famous?
Selling something there.
The Kearns clock.
The clock.
The clock. Yep, the clock.
That's a Kearns.
That's the Kearns department store. Kearns was founded in 1883 by Ernst Kern and his wife, Marie Kern. They specialized in importing fabrics, laces, and ribbons. Kearns started at St. Antoine in East Lafayette. Remember I told you where my husband and I lived when we first moved? Well, that was where they first started, but now they're all apartment buildings or condos there. And then they moved to Randolph and Monroe, finally settling in 1897 to the building in Woodward and Gratiot. Between 1919 and 1928, the store expanded to 10 stories. New additions included an auditorium, a roof garden, an employee gymnasium, a dining room, 21 elevators, and a street entrance directly to the basement. This was Kearns in the 1920s. Kearns started mail order service to out-of-state customers. That was a first. The store had a Brentano's bookshop and a lending library, which you don't really hear about anymore unless you're at our library, which is a lending library. Kearns was famous for its basement dollar days. The sale was so popular. Now this is the part I really, really miss, and I would like to have that today. The sale was so popular that in the 1930s, Chevrolet offered courtesy autos to shuttle shoppers home with their purchases. Wouldn't you like that, to go do your Christmas shopping and be picked up at the door and have somebody take you to your home? That would be so great. It would be nice, but I don't think they do that anymore. This is inside Kearns at Christmas time. That's how busy it was. Yes, it was a very popular store. The Kern Company was sold in 1957 due to lack of customer parking and the suburban stores. And the downtown store closed its doors December 23, 1959, as the famous Kearns clock that had adorned the store since 1933 struck midnight. The store was demolished in 1966, and the site remained undeveloped until 1966, when the Campus Martius project began. And now it's very popular again because that's where CompuWare headquarters. I have at least 8 friends that work in that CompuWare headquarters downtown. The clock was removed and placed in storage in 1966, restored in 1970, placed at Woodward and Gratiot, removed and stored again in 1998. This is all because they stored it when there was any renovation or demolishing going on. And in 2003, it was installed at the corner of Woodward and Gratiot, and that's where it is today. This was the demolishing of the Kern building in 1966. This is where the Kern block is, the Kern's clock is today. Okay, now I don't know how many of you are familiar with this or not, but when the clock was placed above the entrance of the Kern building in #33, it became a landmark, and people would say, you know, they'd be shopping downtown at different stores, we'll meet under the Kern clock. Used to happen to my parents, not me, but anybody here familiar with the saying?
Heard about it.
Okay. Okay. What is the name of this store located on Woodward between Grand River and State Street? This is not really considered a department store like the others.
Was it Woolworth?
No, but you're close. She said Woolworths. It's not, but she's close. What else could it be? Kresge's. The Kresge store on Woodward in 1970s. Sebastian Sparing Kresge opened the first dime store on Grand River and State, Woodward Avenue between Grand River and State in the mid-'80s. They carried 1,500 items, not one costing more than 10 cents. Can you imagine that? 1,500 items and nothing cost more than 10 cents. This ended in 1917 when Kresge was forced to raise prices to 15 cents due to World War I inflation. 15 cents. How many things can you buy today for 15 cents? By 1920, Kresge sold items ranging from 25 cents to $1. It reached its peak in 1935. And my mother, before she got married to my dad, she worked at the Kresge store downtown. Kresge's had a snack bar or luncheonette. They served home-cooked meals, hot waffles and ice cream sandwiches. You could purchase the top 40 records, get keys made, buy bus passes, buy money orders, get passport photos. What a variety. Now you have to go to different places for all of those. This was the Kresge's lunch counter. And this was the luncheonette where they had like mirrors there, but you had privacy because you could seat a couple people or one person so you could enjoy your lunch in private. In 1960, with declining profits and increased costs, Kresge came up with an innovative idea that changed retail history. The firm began a retail innovation in 1952 by converting their stores to a checkout operation. Previously, there was one paid cashier behind every showcase, which means that if you were going to buy things in the sewing department, you paid at the sewing department. If you were going to buy things in the toy department, you paid at the toy department. And they're the ones that started the checkout where you take everything you're buying and you take it up front to check it out. In 1962, Harry Cunningham, president of Kresge's, opened the first Kmart discount store. By 1987, the last of the Kresge's variety stores were sold to the McCrory Corporation, and the downtown Kresge closed Christmas Eve, 1974. This is the first Kmart, and it's in Garden City. It's been renovated. It was opened in '62, but you can still shop there today. So if you go out to Garden City, stop by and look in the Kmart there. On November 11th, Kmart Corporation purchased Sears, changed their name to the Sears Holding Company, and they continue to operate both Kmart and Sears stores today. Okay, what's this store display? What store? The name has been mentioned. Woolworth store. That was the other dime store in downtown Detroit. Woolworth store was at Monroe and Grand River. And if you look at that photo, you don't see any men working there, do you? They're all women. F.W. Woolworth opened his first store in 1878 in Utica, New York, but it failed. He opened his second store in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 1879, and it did so well, he opened 2 more stores. And then he continued to open stores, and the one was in Detroit. Woolworth sold items at fixed prices, a nickel or a dime. Again, we're back when. When I see this, you know, with these stores, you know what comes to my mind? How much gas used to cost a long time ago? Yes, we'll never see that again either. In 1949, it opened its lunch counters, and in 1979 became one of the world's largest department store chains. This was the Woolworth's lunch counter. You can tell what time of year that is, right about like now maybe. In 1960, it changed from a 5 and dime to a discount store called Woolco. Anybody remember the Woolco stores? Okay. As business declined, Woolco closed in 1983, and then Woolworth also that year closed more than 400 of their stores. By 1997, all of the stores closed, and the corporate name was changed to Venator. In 2001, the company name changed to Foot Locker. How many of you know that? Did you know that it was the history of the Foot Locker stores? Okay. And the downtown Detroit Woolworth building was converted into apartments also, so that was never demolished. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you like this, we're going to do more programs for seniors in winter and spring, and then we'll do more in the summer. Mostly they'll be on Fridays. What we're trying to do is we're working with the Senior Center, so they have programs that they promote in their newsletter that we do here, and we promote theirs that they do here. But we were trying to find a time where we didn't interfere with their program, so that's why we're doing Fridays, because that seemed to be the best time. Anyway, on Friday, February 6th from 1 to 2, Oakland County Talking Books is an outreach service, and they stopped doing it. So I think it's Rochester Hills took it over, and they do the outreach services for people who need the talking books. And then after that, we will have a book swap. Large print books, regular books. Bring a book to leave and take one that you want to take home with you. So we hope you will come to that. Then in Friday, March 6, 2015, from 11 to 12, Robin Danto, Lauren set this up, so I'm not familiar with the person, but they're doing food safety and nutrition education from Oakland County and will present on healthy foods for adult seniors. Obviously, the Boston Cooler and the Bumpy Cake will not be on their list. Then on April 10th in 2015 from 1 to 2, you'll be able to create a fun craft and take it with you. Usually we've saved the craft for the children's programs, but Beth, one of our part-time librarians, is going to do one for seniors. If you want, you can call the library or check our future newsletters for additional programs. We don't have them all definite, but I do know in August we're going to have an afternoon high tea. So that's just something to mention also. And we would like to thank Independent Television for videotaping this program today and making it available in our service area.